What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Katson's Corner. It's been a little while since I talked to you guys, but I am back. The flow is back. I haven't cut my hair since November because it's draft season, baby. I don't have time for things like that until May. Um, it's been a little while since I've seen you guys. I apologize. Draft season has been kicking my butt this year. I've also got some added responsibilities covering the UW Huskies in a bigger capacity this year. So I've been out at spring practice doing all that stuff. So I've been busy. But we are back today to do a quick update video. We're going to review the Beast. If you guys follow the draft at all, you know that last week was one of the best days on the calendar as far as it pertains to draft season. And that's Dane Brugler's release of The Beast, which is his draft guide that comes out every year on The Athletic. This year it is 324 pages of pure NFL draft analysis. Um, so we're going to go through position by position, talk about a couple guys that I was maybe a little bit surprised by ranking wise, and just kind of talk through like where Dan and I might differ about things, kind of what it means for the Chargers, maybe, and yeah, just talk about all that sort of stuff. Before we do that, make sure you guys do, of course, all the YouTube stuff, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you got the notifications on for all the live streams and stuff everyone is doing. I know Styler. Steven and Tyler are planning on doing a live stream this year. I don't know how involved I'm going to end up being because I will be on site in Detroit for the draft. So if you guys are coming out to go to the draft, make sure you say what's up. Um, Also, make sure you are following me on Twitter at Alex Katson, the way you see it spelled on the screen. Get all the Chargers content that I'll be doing. I'll be on instant analysis for all of the picks that the Chargers make, as I have been for the last 2 years over at Chargers Wire. We'll also be doing breaking picks for every Washington player that gets drafted over at Huskies Wire, along with some other stuff that I'm very excited about. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks. But this is what it's all for. This is why we're here, and I am super excited for the draft to finally get here and finally get going. Mostly because it means that there's only a couple more weeks until I get to go to bed. But without further ado, we will go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about some of the stuff in the Beast this year. We're going to start with quarterbacks. Of course, the name to watch for the Chargers, not because he's going to be on the Chargers, but because we're just trying to figure out like what his whole deal is JJ McCarthy, the quarterback from Michigan. Dan Brugler has him as QB4, which is pretty chalk at this point. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then JJ McCarthy at QB4. Now, what I did think was interesting about this is that Dane has a fringe first round grade on JJ McCarthy. It's a 1-2 grade. Um, his summary mentions that McCarthy's evaluation feels incomplete, creates even more projection than normal. Uh, Passing skills, pocket athleticism, mental makeup, all ascending, create optimism for his future. Bumps along the way should be expected, but he has the package of tools to become an NFL starter early in his career. He has him ranked as his number 21 overall player. Now, for the Chargers, this is bad news. Because ideally, you'd like to see someone like Dane Brugler, who is very plugged in and very aware about what the draft landscape is going to look like, to have JJ McCarthy a little bit higher. For reference, Jaden Daniels, who's QB3, is his number 8 overall player. Jaden Daniels is probably going to go in the top 3 picks unless something crazy happens. And so for the Chargers, right, we're talking about like, hey, we want someone to come up and trade up for JJ McCarthy, whether that's at number 4 with Arizona to come up and take JJ at number 4 so that we get Marvin Harrison Jr., or to come up at 5 and give the Chargers more ammo to make draft picks on day 2 and day 3 or in 2025, right? That's what we want as Chargers fans, most of us. Um, Ranking him as the number 21 overall player with a fringe first, second round grade is not super optimistic for that happening. And it does kind of lead into something that I think is more of a possibility than I think a lot of people have alluded to so far in this draft process, which is that quarterbacks have never gone with the top 4 overall picks all in a row. there's a reason that that has happened, and it's because, like, most teams, the 4th best quarterback is not the number 1 player on their board by the time you get to the 4th overall pick. We did this in 2021 with that quarterback class with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. And we said those guys could all go 1 through 4. And they went 1, 2, 3, and then Fields fell to number 11. And I think that there's a greater possibility than people are giving it credit for that JJ McCarthy or whoever the 4th quarterback off the board is falls a little bit. And that is horrible news for the Chargers, unless you are of the opinion that taking Joe Alt at 5 is a fine outcome for the Chargers. Taking Malik Neighbors at 5, if the Cardinals go Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, is a good outcome for the Chargers. There are other things that like are going to be available to the Chargers with that 5th overall pick, but it does hamper the trade down scenario, and it does hamper the possibility that the Chargers end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. if JJ McCarthy falls down the board a little bit. And so that's something that I feel like should be watched. Obviously, Dane Brugler's rankings are not gospel. It doesn't mean that JJ McCarthy is going to be the 21st overall pick, but it is interesting that he has him graded a little bit lower, where typically like there's not that big of a gulf, especially with guys at the top of the draft, between Brugler's rankings and a lot of other people's rankings have him in that kind of similar range, and how the NFL feels about a player. So that's something to watch. I think that he's going to go a little bit later than people are expecting, and I want you guys to be prepared for that because there's a real possibility where there's no trade offer that comes in. And if a trade offer does come in, it's for a wide receiver and not for Jay McCarthy. Now, I do also want to talk about Sam Hartman, the Notre Dame quarterback, because Dane Brugler has him as his QB 12. And the main reason why we're talking about him is because there is a school of thought out there that I sort of subscribe to that uh, you should take a quarterback every year. No matter whether you have your franchise answer or not, you should draft a quarterback every season. The Chargers obviously have 3 quarterbacks on the roster as of today. They have Justin Herbert, they have Easton Stick, and they have Max Duggan. Easton Stick was brought back to be the backup again. He's at this point kind of I wouldn't say he's exclusively a locker room like culture guy, but he hasn't done a ton on the field. And like when he had to play in those 3 games, he was okay, I guess, given the circumstances. But I wasn't like super thrilled about anything that he did those last 3 games. And so, like, if you're looking for a new future at the backup position, or you're just looking for someone to like push Max Duggan a little bit because like what we saw in the preseason from him was not super great, and the regime that drafted him is gone. Hartman, I think, is the guy that makes the most sense for the Chargers. Brugler has him rated as like a 6th, 7th rounder, compares him to Greg Maddux, the MLB pitcher, where like he's not gonna like he doesn't have like a huge arm or anything. He's not gonna blow balls by you or anything. But he's got accuracy, like he's a real like painter with the ball. And he's got like the intangibles and stuff that you want from a backup quarterback. Kind of a similar thing with Duggan, except that uh, Max Duggan was worse at football. And so I think that's someone to keep an eye on of like if they're going to go the backup route. Again, keep in mind also like the Chargers went to a ton of Notre Dame games this year, and so something to keep in mind there in the later rounds of someone that they could take a flyer on to just kind of be another guy in the room on the whiteboard to essentially be like a scout team quarterback slash like assistant coach kind of guy. Moving on to running backs, we're going to talk about the Blakes. Obviously, Blake Corum, the apple of Alex Insdorf's eye in this draft, his favorite player in the draft. Brugler has him rated as RB2 and number 77 overall with a 3rd round grade. I wanted to talk about him because, like, he's not my RB2. I can tell you he's lower than that. The only running back that Brugler has him rated below is Jonathan Brooks. I personally prefer Trey Benson, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, at least. Oh, my video just went out. That's awesome. All right, we're back. But yeah, I think like Brugler having him at RB2 is notable, because it 77 overall, again, it's something where like we've talked about Corum on this channel a ton because obviously there's so many connections to draw between him and the staff and the way that like everyone around that Michigan program talks about him. And the thing that we've always kind of come down on and guilty as charged is that Corum would be a fine pick on day 3, like round 4 or later, fine, sure, whatever, I get it. This ranking and this like uh grade on him suggests that he if the Chargers are going to pick him, it would be at 69 in with the third round pick. And that's higher than I want to do that. Especially with the Chargers bringing in J.K. Dobbins earlier today as I record this. It's a really tough proposition to get me on board with that. But it is notable, having him up there as a third rounder. To Brugler's credit, everyone from Brooks down to Bucky Irving at RB8 is between a like fringe second, third round grade and a fringe third or fourth round grade, which lines up kind of with what my thoughts are on the top of this running back class is, which is that no one is going to go super high and then a bunch of them are going to go all in a row. And it's really going to depend on scheme fit and on what teams are missing in their running back room and want to add. Um, Moving on to Watson, I did want to talk about him because he's someone that has popped up a lot for Charger specific interests in the last few weeks. Brugler has him rated as a sixth, seventh round player at RB19, above a couple of other guys that we've talked about before, like Kamani Vidal, who's RB21, Jace McClellan, who just got a Chargers visit reported earlier today at RB22. Some other guys a little bit further down the board as well that Brugler has rated as PFAs. I think, especially with the addition of Dobbins, Watson is the guy that now makes the most sense in the later rounds for me as someone for them to add. And so I think that sort of like grade on him is something to keep an eye on. Of like if he's still available in the sixth round, I think that makes a little bit more sense than the Chargers maybe spending like a third round pick on a running back now that they have two established NFL guys. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is health permitting. Let's move on to wide receivers here. We're going to talk about Troy Franklin, um, because I've been seeing Franklin getting round 1 hype, and I don't get it, guys. I really wish I could be there with you guys. I know a ton of people that watch this channel are also Oregon fans. Obviously, like I'm going to try to stay unbiased as a non-Oregon guy, as a Washington guy talking about a rival, but I just don't see it. And neither does Brugler. He has him at wide receiver 12 with a fringe second or third round grade. Um, you know, Pretty far cry from what people are talking about is like this is a potential round 1 guy because of the speed, because of like the vertical stretching ability, but like that's all he brings to an NFL offense right now. To me, it's very reminiscent of the Jalen Hyatt discussion last season. Obviously, Chargers fans are very familiar with Hyatt's draft process. He was someone that was mocked over and over and over and over again at 21st overall as just like, let's get a vertical stretcher, let's add speed to this offense. And you could see the vision for doing that. But Hyatt ended up being a third round pick because like there's not a ton else to his game right now. Um, and that's how I feel about Franklin. And Brugler is kind of on the same page with me about that. Again, like second, third round valuation. I think he's going to be right on that border. But there's a lot of guys up here that I like. Even like right after him, Jalen Polk is wide receiver 13, Xavier Legette, wide receiver 14, Jalen McMillan down at wide receiver 19, Javon Baker, wide receiver 20. Like all of those sorts of guys I could see. And I know I listed 2 Washington guys out of those 4, but like I've heard a couple of things about like both of those guys going a little bit higher than is projected. But like all those 4 guys, like I think could end up like even sneaking a little bit above him and being second round picks while Franklin drops to third because he's just like he's a one trick pony right now. Um, and then I want to talk about Malik Washington, my boy. If you guys have watched any of the videos on the channel, followed any of the stuff that I've been doing this draft season, you know that I love Malik Washington. He was great at the Shrine Bowl. Uh, James McPherson, the national scout, who I see in every video and tweet every time that I see him, he ran Washington's pro day workout at Virginia because Sanjay Lal, the wide receivers coach, was at Texas. But that's not important. What's important is that McPherson was there and he was running the workout. Brugler has Washington with a third round grade. And it's a little bit unfortunate for Chargers fans because like I've been penciling him in at like one of those 105 or 110 picks in the beginning of the fourth round. And Brugler has him as like a solid third rounder, like not even like a fringe 3-4 guy, like solid third rounder, which makes me a little bit concerned that the Chargers might not be able to get him, which would disappoint me so much because I really want him on this football team. Obviously, he's going to be more of a slot limited guy, just because of his size, but he is like going to be one of the most like polished route runners out of the slot in the NFL, like from day one. And I love those kinds of guys, and I really hope the Chargers can find a way to grab him. But I do worry a little bit. Brugler has him wide receiver 15 with that third round grade. I do worry a little bit that he might be just out of reach for the Chargers, like just in between those third and fourth round picks. Moving on to tight end, we're going to talk about Ben Sinnott. Um, I thought it was really interesting. Brugler has Sinnott down at tight end 6. He's my tight end 2. Obviously Brock Bowers tight end 1. And then Brugler has Jatavion Sanders at 2, Theo Johnson 3, Jared Wiley 4, and then Cade Stover at 5, Ben Sinnott at 6 with a fourth round grade. I have Ben Sinnott tight end 2. I think that he could potentially sneak all the way up into the second round above Jatavion Sanders, who had a really, really rough athletic testing portion of the pre-draft process. And so yeah, I think it's interesting, right? It's something to consider because it does mean that like perhaps there's a way that the Chargers have a talented tight end like that fall to them at 105 or at 110, kind of at the top of the fourth round, with guys like Stover and Sinnott kind of like in that range. I do think that like they end up like Sanat especially ends up going just to like a little bit higher. I think he's done enough during the pre-draft process to convince teams of that. But like I don't know. I don't know. I mean, having him tight end 6 is mind blowing to me. Kind of in a similar fashion, but in the opposite direction. Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona, who I know Tyler has been tweeting about a fair bit the last couple of days here as he's kind of gone back and watched some guys. Brugler's got him as tight end 7, fourth, fifth round grade. And like he's someone that I wrote an article the other day about like tight end prospects in every round of the draft for the Chargers over on Chargers Wire. You guys can go check it out if you want. And I had McLaughlin as like the option in the 7th round, because on the consensus board that's run by Jack Lichtenstein, over on his website, McLaughlin is like down in like the 300s or like the 250s or something, like down, like way, way down. And so I'm like, okay, well, they can get him in the 7th then. And Brugler's has him rated as a fourth, fifth round guy, like super high on him in the top 10 tight ends above guys like Tip Ryman and Jaheim Bell. And I'm like, oh, okay, like maybe that's someone that the Chargers have to like consider using one of those 2 fourth round picks on, or using their 5th round pick on if they want to get him into the room. And so I thought that was interesting as well. But yeah, these tight end rankings as a whole, honestly, are very interesting. Colson Yankoff is in here as tight end 17, who's like a guy that showed up to Washington as a quarterback and then transferred a couple times. So it's wild. Over at offensive tackle, I want to talk about Brandon Coleman, who Brugler has as OT9, with a second, third round grade. Mostly want to talk about him because the Chargers did have a confirmed private meeting with him, I think about a week or so ago. So he's someone to kind of keep an eye on as like maybe a second rounder, but probably more of a third rounder. Like if they don't take a tackle super high up on the board. Coleman can also play guard, but Brugler has him rated as a tackle. We'll talk about some guys that he has rated as guards in a second here. And then Christian Jones, again, kind of like McLaughlin, Brugler has him rated as a fourth rounder. I thought Jones was kind of more of like a 5, 6, 7 guy. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. But he has him as OT 13, above a couple of guys that I like Frank Crum and Travis Glover at 19 and 20. And so, interested to see what happens with him there as well. Fourth rounder, I think, is probably a little bit rich for me where I'm probably good. He's also a little bit more of a left tackle anyway. And so maybe is not a super great Chargers fit to begin with. But especially if he's going to go up in the fourth round, I think I am good on him. Moving through to guards here. So I want to talk about Troy Fautanu because Brugler has him rated as a guard, and he has him rated as his first overall guard, with a bona fide first round grade. But Brugler has also been talking about this week, especially since the Beast came out, about how some teams think that Fautanu is a center in the NFL and is like the top center in the draft and has like true five position versatility, which I think is interesting because the Chargers sent Mike Devlin, the offensive line coach, to Washington's pro day to do that workout. And they met with him prior to pro day, according to Jordan Schultz, who works over at Bleacher Report. And so I wonder if the Chargers are one of those teams that see Fautanu as a potential center. Because if they are, then trading down and taking him at 11 or at 23 if he gets all the way down there and playing him at center is a potential option. Do I love that? Not really. He's never played center in the NFL, and so you're asking him to make a huge adjustment on like a line that already is going through a bunch of huge adjustments. But it's something to think about. It's something that might happen. It's something to consider. So I did want to talk about him, and especially because like he played left tackle at Washington, and Brewer has him rated as guard anyway, and so we're already asking him to change positions and everything. And then Satawa Lomea from Utah, I thought was an interesting guy as well. Brugler has him rated as his ninth overall guard with a fourth round grade. He's another guy that the Chargers worked with on center drills at the combine. Devlin was running the drills there. Stayed a little bit late with Lomea as well as Keaton Bills, the other Utah guard, and worked with them on snapping. And so seeing him with a fourth round grade as a potential like guard center flex, I thought was also pretty interesting to see from Dane. Moving on to center, we're going to talk about some guys that you probably already know about if you've been following the draft, starting with Tanner Bortolini, or as he's better known in the Guilty as Charged Discord, Tortellini. Third, fourth round grade, center four, pretty high on him from Brugler. Has him above guys like Cedric Van Pran. Third, fourth round grade, like pretty steep drop off between the top three and then Bortolini at four. But I think that's kind of to be expected with the way that we see this center class right now. I do think that if they want him, it does mean that they'd probably have to go like 105 or 110 at that point with like a fringe 3-4 grade. Might even have to move up into the back end of the third in order to grab him like that. And then Hunter Norzad, we've talked about a ton on this channel between me, between Steven, everyone. Like we've talked about him a ton. On the PFF mock draft simulator, you can still get Hunter Norzad in the sixth round. And I don't understand why. I need to ask Trevor Sikkema why that's still possible. Brugler, on the other hand, is up with the times. He's got Hunter Norzad at a fourth round grade, center seven, which I think is much more realistic. I think if they want Norzad again, it's going to have to be at like 105, 110. You're noticing there's a lot of guys that we've talked about a lot during this draft cycle that all of a sudden, like I'm harping on those picks 105, 110. That's going to be the range where they're going to have to take some of those guys. And maybe that's the reason that they picked up an extra fourth rounder in the first place for Keenan Allen, is because they want to grab two of those guys instead of just one of them. But Norzad, I think, could very well be one of them, especially if they don't get a guy like Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, or Zach Frazier. Powers Johnson and Frazier, we can talk about a different time, but they're guys that have been kind of falling out of the first round discourse a little bit lately, and so they might be available at 37. But if they're not, I think 105, 110 is kind of where you're looking at for a center right now between Bortolini, Van Pran, Bo Limmer, Hunter Norzad, all those sorts of guys kind of bunched up in that range. Moving on to defensive tackle, I want to talk about Johnny Newton because I don't understand what's going on with him. Everyone in the media loves Johnny Newton, including me and Steven and a bunch of other people that I know ball. Everyone has him as like a top 15 player in this draft. And no one is projecting him to go in the top 15 because it doesn't seem like the NFL is going to take him in the top 15. Brugler has him rated as a first, second round player, that he has as his number 28 overall player. I don't get it, guys. He's so good. He's so good. We've talked about him the entire year on this channel. He's been someone that I've been super high on since last summer. I know that he's a little bit undersized. He's a little bit compact, and that's going to make him a little bit more of a specific player for certain teams. But he's so good. Like, I don't know how else to say it. He's just so good. And like, he's going to be a starting three tech from day one. And like, if they make this trade down with Minnesota and they pick up 11 and 23, I'd be fine taking him at 11. But it seems like he's going to be there at 23. And so if you want to take him at 23 and take someone else at 11, like I am thrilled with that first round. I don't care if there's not a wide receiver that you take in that group of picks because you can get a guy at 37. Like, if that's the group that you get, I am over the moon. And it doesn't even seem like this is the part that's crazy to me about it too, is like it doesn't even seem like that Newton falling out of the first round a little bit, or falling out of the top 15, I guess I should say a little bit, has to do with the foot injury that he suffered and has like been rehabbing. It seems like it just has to do with his tape. And I don't get that because everyone that I talk to, and as I watch it, and as I see other people tweet about it, and as like I talk to people about it, everyone that I talk to loves his tape. And it just seems like the NFL isn't on the same page. And I don't get why. And I really want to pick someone's brain about like why they don't have Newton as high because I it just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, and then also Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, who's a guy I've talked about a couple times, was like a huge Shrine Bowl standout, ended up getting snubbed from the combine. Brugler has him rated as a sixth round player. I think he could go a lot higher than that. I think he could be in play like as early as like the fourth or the fifth. Um, had a great pro day, was able to work out at Cooper DeJean's individual pro day as well a week or so ago, which is not reflected in the Beast because of how late it was, but is reflected some other places. You can go look up some of the numbers that he posted. I think it was mostly just, I think he ran of the 40. He did the bench at Northern Iowa's pro day, and then I think he did positional drills. It's not like a ton of athletic testing available for him, but he's someone that I still really like as like a later round guy to bring in and be like a rotational player for the Chargers. And so someone to keep an eye on, maybe a little bit later than we've been kind of pushing the last couple of months here for him. Moving on to edge, I want to talk about Marshawn Nealand because this is one where I don't necessarily think he's going to be picked for the Chargers, but his rise up draft boards could be very fortuitous for the Chargers' plans at 37. Uh, Brugler has Nealand rated as edge 5 with a first, second round grade, so like a fringe top 32 grade. He has him as his number 32 overall player, actually right on the dot. So like if you're just picking Brugler's top 32 and that's the first round, Marshawn Nealand would be the last pick of the first round. Now, we have not really talked about this edge class a ton because once they brought back Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa and everyone else, obviously Tulitu Pelotu is still on the team. Edge is not as big of a need for the Chargers. They're not going to take one super early, but we're quickly approaching a reality where there could be like up to 5 edges that go in the first round between Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu, Chop Robinson, Marshawn Nealand. You can even sneak Darius Robinson in there if you want to. So like 5 or 6 guys could conceivably go in the first round. And if Nealand sneaks into the back half of that first round, like somewhere in the 20s or the early 30s, that means that there's a player at a position of need that the chart, like whether it's Jackson Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier or like a Lad McConkey, or another wide receiver or a corner, one of those guys will get to 37 because you run out of spots, right? Like if Marshawn Nealand is going from the 45th ranked player to the 27th ranked player all of a sudden on draft night, then like everyone else gets pushed down one. And there are going to be some teams where they're like, well, we don't need a wide receiver. We don't need a corner. We don't need a center. And so then they get pushed down a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then suddenly you're on the clock at 37 and you're like, oh, wow, we have all these great players that we can take. This is sick. And so I did think it was notable for that reason of, could be someone that sneaks in the first round and makes a great player drop to the Chargers at 37. And then Mohamed Kamara, I wanted to talk about because I think that Brugler's a little bit low on him. Brugler's got him in the 5-6 range at edge 18, right above guys like Xavier Thomas and Javon Solomon. I think he's a little bit better than that. I know he's tiny, like came in at 6'1.5", 248, pretty short arms for an edge, like sub 32.5-inch arms. But he's another player where it's just like you turn on the tape and he's so good. He's just good. I love his tape. And I think that he has a role in the NFL, even with the like diminished size a little bit. He's someone that like I'd be comfortable taking as early as the third or the fourth. But if he is available at like the end of the fifth, top of the sixth, and the Chargers want to take a shot on him and try to develop him, I think that that's certainly something that they could do. Certainly a path that they could go down, and so might be something to watch if he starts to fall down boards a little bit compared to where I have him. All right. Talking about linebackers here, we're going to talk about Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. Um, Brugler's linebacker 3. And it's not the 2 that you might think above him. It's Junior Colson and then Edgerrin Cooper and then Trevin Wallace at 3 and Peyton Wilson at 4. Trevin Wallace and Peyton Wilson both with third round grades. Edgerrin Cooper kind of right in that fringe range between 2 and 3, and then Junior Colson with a bona fide second round grade. I think this is pretty high on Wallace. I'm not like a huge fan of his. He was at the Senior Bowl and he was okay. Like I wasn't like super stoked on him. Brugler's summary here: attractive collection of traits. Parts are better than the whole at this point. Pro coaching will need to get him across the finish line. More seasoning. He has the talent to compete for starting reps. 86th overall player. I would imagine that Wilson's medicals are a big factor in like why he's ranked under Wallace here. But basically, like Wallace is a project linebacker. I think. Like I think he's a lot closer to like a Deion Henley sort of player where it's like all of the things that you have are great, but you haven't quite put all of those things together yet to like be like a great football player. And we already have Deion Henley. I don't know if we need another project guy in that room. We kind of need someone that can like play right away, even if they're maybe a little bit more limited, or even if they come with like some injury risk like Wilson does. And so I'm a little bit lower on him. I just like nothing about his pre-draft process, nothing about his film, nothing about anything that he's done really has really like wowed me. And so I was a little bit surprised to see him that high. And then Jordan McGee from Temple, I am glad to see this high. He's Brugler's linebacker 8 with a fourth, fifth round grade. PFF simulator, you can get him like all the way down in the seventh. A lot of people have been talking about him as like a special teams guy. I think he can be a lot more than that. Just hasn't really gotten the opportunity to show it because he got injured late in the season, had to miss the Senior Bowl. Um, Either didn't get invited or didn't do a ton at the combine, and then did really well at his pro day. Went through a bunch of special team drills at his pro day, mostly from the Eagles. And I think he's going to be someone that has a really bright future in this league. Again, a little bit more of a project, but I think having him in like the fourth, fifth round range is a lot more reasonable than like having someone like Trevor Wallace in the third. And so if they don't go linebacker super early, I think you could potentially think about him kind of like in the top of the fifth round sort of deal if he's still available. Moving on to corners, almost done here. I know we're going a little bit over time. Sorry, Steven, who's watching this. But we're going to talk about corners and then talk about safeties, and then we'll get out of here. Corners, I want to talk about DeCamerion Richardson. He had a Chargers visit last week, and so it's kind of a pertinent topic right now. Brugler's corner 18, fourth, fifth round grade, right above Cam Hart at 19 and Kyrie Jackson at 21. I am on board with this. We talked about Richardson back in September. If you've been watching Katson's Corner all season, the Chargers went to that Mississippi State LSU game, which was one of Richardson's worst games this season, unfortunately. But we did talk about him, and in the spring, he did have third, fourth round grades. And so he slipped a little bit since then. Maybe didn't have like the greatest senior season that he was hoping for, but still a guy that's going to be kind of right on that like day 2, day 3 fringe range. Chargers visit and everything, and so I think he's someone to keep an eye on. Kind of fits the archetype, fits the mold of what they're looking for in this defense, and is like a huge straight line speed guy. Like he's got a 10.6 700 meter in high school, sub 22 200 meter. He's a blazer. And he's gotten a lot of interest in the last couple of weeks here on the visit circuit. And then Quantez Stiggers, he's actually from the Toronto Argonauts of the CFL. He's Brugler's corner 30, sixth round grade, was at the Shrine Bowl, got a chance to talk to him while I was down there. Great kid. He has like one of the most fascinating stories of any prospect I can remember. Didn't play college football at all. Was enrolled at Lane College, the D2 school that Andrew Farmer came from. If you know the UDFA from last year, was there for a couple of months, and then his father passed away, and I believe it was a car accident, and it was during COVID and everything, so everything was kind of weird. He went home for a little while, dropped out of school, ended up playing in fan-controlled football for a year, and then parlayed that into a tryout for the Argonauts of the CFL. Ends up winning CFL Rookie of the Year, and then was going to try to just sign in the NFL as a free agent. And the NFL was like, "Hey, man, it's your draft class that's up this year. Like you're eligible for the draft." So now he's here and he's in the draft and he didn't get invited to the combine and it sucked. And he had to do his pro day at his high school over in Atlanta, which the Chargers did attend, if I remember correctly. But he rocks. I think that he's like a nice dart throw, kind of in the later rounds if you're looking for more depth at corner. And so someone to keep an eye on. Again, like sixth round grade, not going to be like a super high impact player in year one, but someone who has just defied the odds at every single step of the way. Wouldn't expect him to do anything less in the NFL at this point. And finally, safeties. Dadrion Taylor Demerson, better known as Rabbit, safety 7 for Brugler, right above Kalen Bullock at 8, third, fourth round grade. I think this is awesome. Taylor Demerson rocks. He's going to be more of a nickel guy. Like he's kind of a nickel safety hybrid type guy. So think like not exactly Derwin James, but a little bit more like some of those guys that come down and play the nickel. But like doesn't have the same frame as Derwin. So some of those smaller guys that come down and do that, like more of like a Julian Blackman sort of guy, maybe. But he rocks. I really like him, and I think that if he goes that high, it's going to be well deserved. Was another guy who was at the Shrine Bowl, another guy who whose tape I really liked. Was great at the Shrine Bowl. Was a great interview, and so I was stoked to see him that high. And then Sione Vake is actually down at safety 18 with a 6th round grade, under a couple guys like Dijon Anthony, Jalen Carley's from Missouri, who like haven't gotten a ton of buzz this draft cycle, which I was a little bit surprised by. I get Vaki is going to be more of a projection. The positional versatility thing, I know people are like a fan of, and it's cool and everything, but it's not really like a like supplement to his draft evaluation. Like if you think he's going to play safety, he's just going to play safety. He's not going to like play running back also. Like we've done this with guys like Jabril Peppers before, where like he played wide receiver a little bit at Michigan and then he got in the league and everyone was like, they're going to do all these trick plays with him. And it's going to be so crazy. And then they did that like 3 times. And now he just plays safety and he's like, okay. And so I think it's going to be kind of the same deal with Vaki. But I do think that 6th round is maybe a little bit discounting him because I think that he is a prime candidate for a guy whose value is super inflated by the new kickoff rules, because the new kickoff doesn't necessarily value speed a ton as much as the old one did. Obviously, if you're a Blazer, you're a Blazer. You can return kicks any day of the week. Like if you're Percy Harvin, you can return kicks anytime you want. But Vaki ran a 4.51 at the combine or at his pro day. I don't know which one it was off the top of my head, actually, as I'm thinking about it. But he ran a 4.51 according to Brugler, which isn't like the fastest guy in the world, but he's got that running back experience. He's got a little bit more size to him, a little bit more vision to him. And that's what the new kickoff is all about. It's all about vision. It's all about like being able to break tackles, being able to hit holes. And like you don't necessarily have to have the same pull away speed that you did as a traditional kick returner prior to this year. And so I do think that his value might get a little bit inflated by that. I do caution, thinking that he's going to be available in the 6th round. But if he is, the Chargers do need depth at safety, and I wouldn't be mad about it. That is going to do it today. A little bit longer of an episode for you guys because I've been away. I know typically we try to keep it under 30 minutes, but hopefully you guys didn't mind an extra 8 or 9 minutes of content there. A little bit looser this this episode. Hopefully you guys felt that as well. I hope you guys are excited as I am for the draft to get here and for us to finally have like players that we can talk about where we're just like, hey, they're on the Chargers. Now let's talk about like what it's going to look like. Because I know people are starting to get sick of like debating, well, who's going to be there at 5? Are we even going to pick at 5? What's going on? I'm getting sick of it too. I know you guys are getting sick of it, but only one more week and then we will officially know who's on the Chargers, who's going to be in the fold for 2024 with Jim Harbaugh, Ben Herbert, Greg Roman, all those guys. And we will see where the roster goes. I'm super excited for it. Again, if you guys are going to be in Detroit and want to come say what's up, feel free to hit me up. I'll be working a little bit, but I'll be around as much as I can. If you just want to follow along with stuff virtually, you're not going to be in Detroit or whatever, that's totally cool as well. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Alex Katson. That's where all my stuff is going to be. Easiest place to find it. And who knows, maybe I'll pop into the live stream if I got a little bit of free time from the media room or just from out and about in Detroit, eating a slice of deep dish pizza or something. Who knows? But until then, guys, hope you guys enjoyed. I will sign off before Steven gets mad at me for going even longer. And I will see you guys very soon. Take care.